And I will say up front, I hate this sketchbook. I purchased this in 2022 because I really wanted to practice like watercolor portraits. How I got into portraits is I use like monochrome to kind of practice like shading and really being comfortable with watercolor. If you delve more with like acrylic or mixed media, I think this sketchbook would do just fine. It's the paper that I'm frustrated with. It's like I want to look at my sketchbook and I want to see how my brain thinks. So I'm gonna treat this as like I'm at art school and I'm doing like a sketchbook critique. I wrote 2020, but I think I started this in 2021. I think. Because this was when I was living in Ellensburg. Okay, so with this piece, obviously I completely butchered it, but that's when I realized this paper wasn't correct for watercolor and what I originally wanted. Because first I butchered it, I realized like the paper wasn't blending as well as I wanted. I mean, you can see even on just like the one color, black, it's just like not blending well, it's not mixing well. I wasn't able to like create that depth of field and that dreamy aspect that I like with watercolor, and I was just getting super frustrated. My inspiration for this was it was like this portrait on my Pinterest. I have a whole like portraits Pinterest page. I was really excited getting this and I wanted to get started as soon as possible, and I just got really frustrated. The hair I went over with like Gooch. The paper wasn't working with me and I was just like, oh my god, like super frustrated. It was like this fluorescent red fluorescent portrait, like fluorescent lights, and I figured, oh well, I'm really good with like monochrome, like just painting a portrait with just black paint or painting a portrait with just like one color, so this shouldn't be that hard, just adding like another color, because it was essentially just like black and red, mostly red because of the fluorescent lights. So maybe I should have gone with just like red and used that as a focus point and then adding the black in the end for like shadow. But yeah, going into this sketchbook was already frustrating. Just to give you an idea, because I don't want to sound like a crazy person where I'm like, oh, this paper sucks, and people might be thinking, well, maybe it's not the paper, maybe it's you. And I don't know, like maybe some people look at this and they're like, yeah, it's you. Obviously this isn't the original, but you can still get the concept of like my skill level and why I was so frustrated with this paper. With this, my motivation was understanding skin color. As you see from the last page, I was really struggling with that, and so my goal was to like really understand skin color, creating skin color from the palettes, from the watercolor paint I already have. Like I was trying to do experiment with like digital downloads, and so I wanted to like put something that was like super simple. I'm implementing the skin color palette and practicing eye drawing, trying to do skin color palettes, and I tried to do a little portrait, but I just like overworked it so much, and like I tried lifting it to correct it, and it just like I would get so frustrated. Like I was not happy with this paper. In order to give yourself a space to explore, you really need that paper that will be forgiving and that will let you expand. Here I actually have a video on this. I'll link it down below, or maybe I'll put it right there, I don't know. But I really like experimenting with collage. I incorporated like portrait artwork with a collage and kind of poetic, because I do have an English degree. So I like the aspect of like poetry and writing and art and implementing all that together. So when I first started my channel, I was trying to incorporate like art is for healing, and at the time I was considering implementing psychology with art in order to pursue becoming an art therapist. But I was going to like do like a whole page, but I wanted to experiment with like dog portraits. This is a portrait of myself as a child, believe it or not. So this is based off like a little picture that I have that was taken of me when I was in a Russian orphanage. This is actually a decent little illustration. So as you can see on this page, I am incorporating more the skin color portraits. I'm trying to like pushing myself that year 2021 to 2022 to really like practice color in portraits and not just using one color. I got frustrated here. As you can see, I was trying to do like another portrait, but I guess like some days you try to like paint something, like you literally draw and paint good every day, and then on that day it's just like you're not like there, and you're like, why can't I just like draw? I know how to draw. Why is it not coming how I want it to come out? If you don't know, I'm adopted from Russia, so I was trying to like connect to my Russian heritage, and in regards to like Russian art and like Slavic paintings that you see on like fabric and ceramics and like pottery oftentimes. So I was like looking at patterns and trying to recreate that. Actually, this is supposed to be clouds. I got a new oil pastel, or soft pastel, and I really wanted to like experiment and push myself. And this is a beautiful seahorse. Again, I have a video on this. This I painted with coffee. But that's the great thing about like Pinterest that I love, is that I'll see something and then I take that, and then just like my imagination takes me to another level. So this was actually really fun to make. I call it like a punk seahorse. Like I feel like if a seahorse was punk, this is how they would look like. So I think my favorite part about is the coffee, and I love like the spikes. It just like gives like a different element to the seahorse. Like I love what I did here, and I want to like maybe create like more aquamarine like sea creatures. But I think with like coffee, I realized is that maybe I haven't experimented like using different coffees or like different elements to like make it darker, but definitely I realized like it was really hard to like create depth Like with watercolor, you just like put more pigment on to make it darker. And like you can either put white to make the color lighter, or like change the color, shading, or you can like add water to like make it more like lighter, and not as pigmented. But with coffee, it just wasn't like that. So to create the more darker parts, I definitely had to like implement a tiny bit of watercolor. But I really wanted to challenge myself with just like creating a piece solely with coffee. So like I said, going into 2021, I really wanted to focus on portraits. So my next piece is this, and as you can see here, like look at that. Like I finally just gave up, because I think that's the limit of this paper, where I just like I couldn't, it was to a point where I just couldn't work with it. Like I pushed it too hard to a limit where it just like, it just, if I kept doing it, trying to like make it work for me, it just like was like, no, I'm over my limit. Like I like, girl, chill. As well as like just creating more interesting like illustrative style portraits. I wanted to still incorporate the portrait studies that I was trying to do with my year, but I also incorporated pen and ink with watercolor, because I was inspired by other illustrations that I saw and other artists that I saw where they implement, this was in regards to like architecture, where they use like watercolor and pen and ink. But I wanted to try incorporating that with portraits. But I feel like having a larger watercolor paper, it just like gives you more, like I feel like you have more space, more canvas. But as you can see, again, I was wanting to implement pen and ink with watercolor, and I was getting away from like trying to create portraits that were realistic, because initially that was my plan going into 2021, creating like color portraits, and like really studying color. But the issue is like with me, I'm not the type of person like I can make a goal and stick with it, because then I get bored. So I have to like create, so that's how you can see like your creativity starts getting challenged, because either you get bored and you just want to implement new ways of creating things and trying to incorporate just like unique, like trying to connect like spirituality with my art. This was a struggle, because I realized I drew the girl and then I added the animals afterwards. So the challenge was like it just like looks misplaced, because I didn't go into it like with the animals. It was just gonna be a portrait. But then I wanted to have fun with it, so I like added little horns, and I want to create like this little demon girl creature. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna like add animals, and like it was just like a spontaneous thing. It wasn't something I was like going into thinking about it. So I drew, this is in 2022, so like I feel like I kind of took a break from watercolor. I think there was a period where I stopped creating art altogether actually, but like I started experimenting with like oil pastels and just like pastel pencils, and just like practicing drawing. I started drawing like a plant, just trying to like be more abstract with my art and not be like, oh, you have to only do this way. So this is when I feel like I started actually incorporating using my sketchbook as a sketchbook and not like that it has to be the masterpiece. So there's an artist I watch on YouTube, and I was just like trying to implement copy a picture that I took a long time ago from a film camera I had, and trying to like use abstract, focusing on the abstract forms to create the copy. So with this, I think it's called blocking. So this is, I call it the soulmates, but the idea was I wanted to like do something different with portraits. So I wanted to like do soulmates, so like couple portraits, but basically put one face of one person on the other side of that person. But I really love how this turned out actually. And I really love the concept of soulmate. I mean, I would love this as like a wedding gift if I was getting married. Okay, so I have to tell my process with this. So originally, you can see this on my Pinterest. Originally, I saw this picture and I was like, oh my god, I have to draw that. And my inspiration was like, oh, that I want to incorporate acrylic paint. And I really wanted to push myself because when I was still going to school for art, I took like an acrylics class because I actually learned through that class that I actually really enjoyed acrylic painting. I was like, oh, I really want to experiment with the acrylic paint that I have. Again, I got super frustrated, but it wasn't the paper's fault, it was my fault because I wasn't at the skill level yet to draw like acrylic paint portraits. So my skill level stopped me, but I mean, I used oil pastels and soft pastels, and then I combined it with acrylic paint. You can see here I got super frustrated, but it actually works out. I think I really like this actually. And like I incorporated just like experiment with like different colors and just like abstract form. Only that's not what I was going to do. It was my vision for this was it was going to be like practice realistic portrait. I wanted to experiment with animal portraits. This I was trying to implement, her name is like Paulina Bright, and when I first got into watercolor, that was like my inspiration. I actually have a few watercolor brushes from her, but yeah, so I was trying to implement like her style of, you can see like me trying to, I guess it's like kind of copying, but I don't think it's like really copying. If you're like, I mean, I think we're always inspired by other artists or other things that we see in the world. I really like drawing like little characters. This idea was like I call it the earth. I think I call it like earth being bored, but I wanted to incorporate like how we're like kind of abusing earth, but I wanted to like how it's like completely like the leaves have fallen away, but like I want to create like a little earth man illustration thing. And then using that same style, I created like a little owl and like a little goat. Actually, like I'm considering like using these as like tattoos. Here we have, I don't even know what you call it. I call it fuck my life. Okay, so with this piece I incorporated actually I mainly worked with acrylic paint and gouache. I was just getting super frustrated because to understand this, because I was getting super frustrated because going into 2021 2022 I had like an on and off relation, a long-term on and off relationship which took me a while to get over. And then yeah, there were like red flags with this, but I was like trying to be hopeful because it was like something new. And I like my usage. You can see like the detail of her face. Like I was going for more like an illustrative, yeah, like this is supposed to be like fire. And if you're interested in tarot, I was kind of going for like a tower inspired like aspect, so that was kind of like just like burn it all, but this was just like a fun piece. I wanted to incorporate like fantasy character illustrations. That's actually where I want to go creatively. I want to like be a children's book or like illustrator, like fantasy characters. That's kind of like one of my goals in regards to my art career, where I want to be. So it was kind of just like, if you play World of Warcraft, that was kind of my inspiration, as well as like I'm into elves and fairies. It doesn't look like much, but I saw something. I saw an illustration. The background was like this bluish forest, and I wanted to like implement like little ghosts after I drew in like the white trees. I might finish this because this, I feel like this looks cooler than I think it is. Like a lot of times, like I just stop creating something and then I go back to it and I was like, why didn't I finish it? That's actually a cool idea. I had purchased like soft oil pastel, and at this time I actually got into soft pastels. So this was horrible. I hate this so much, but it was inspired by a fashion outfit that I saw online, and I was hoping to create something cooler because it looks so cool. But like my illustration of it doesn't give it justice at all. I think this might be the end. So again, just I was using kind of just like seeing how the colors looked. But honestly, I'm gonna go because this was actually exhausting. Like I'm literally gonna go take a nap.